Okay, so thanks for letting me do this. Sorry for the delay. I had a lot of things going on, and then I have a stomach infection right now, so I'm on a painkiller and some antibiotics, so I kind of feel anxious. So if my voice is a little bit off and I'm a little bit loopy, I apologize for that, but is what it is. So anyway, let's go ahead and just jump into this. I got a bunch of notes here. I did a lot of... I'm not going to go... Sometimes I go over things that are good, but it just wastes too much time, so I'm really not going to do that. I'm going to do it for some things, but not everything. So I got some, bullet point notes down here for you, and we'll go over all this. So hopefully we'll get this done in 30 to 45 minutes. So, if you follow what we do here, you're going to be more secure than 99% of WordPress websites on the internet. I don't have any data to back that up, really. I just say that. It's based on, I've worked with, I don't know if I could say hundreds, but at least dozens and dozens of websites from a security point of view. And so that's kind of what I'm basing it on. The idea with security, whether it's WordPress, whether it's Linux, whether it's Apache, whether it's your house, whether it's anything, is it's called managing the risk. You want to not be the low-hanging fruit. There's no way to 100% lock down your WordPress environment, right? If somebody really wants to get into your system, eventually they're going to find a way to get into it. However, what you can do is not show up in all of these bot scans, all of these script scans. You can prevent yourself from being the low-hanging fruit. So like, for example, when I was a kid, and I had a BBS, we used to do war dialing. So war dialing is I would set up my modem overnight, this is in the 80s and 90s, to dial a range of phone numbers. And every phone number that came back with a modem tone, it would just report it to a file, and then I could go experiment with those later on, in the day or the next day or whatever. So you can imagine if a system didn't answer with the tone, I never would have gone to experiment with it anyway. Not a perfect example because back in the day you had to have, there's no way you could really selectively determine where a modem call was coming in from. However, you can set things and change things and obfuscate things on in your environment to where if somebody's scanning for all WordPress servers that run a certain version and then that run, Joe's plugin version 3.5, even if you're running that plugin, you don't show up in that list. So they're never going to start probing your environment anyway to see if they can compromise it. So how hacked websites are compromised. This is from a couple years ago, but this has been pretty consistent for as long as I've been doing this. It's overwhelmingly plugins. So what I'm talking about plugins as plugins that aren't maintained, because eventually every plugin will be compromised with enough eyeballs and with enough manpower going into it. So you want to use plugins that are maintained, don't have a history of being hacked into, and have a large user base using them, right? And then brute force hacking, hacking the core code, themes, et cetera, et cetera. But overwhelming majority, it's plugins, and we're going to get into a lot of this. So you're only as strong as your weakest link. This is just basic security. If you have, and I think you have like 10 administrators, I'll have to go back and look. Like I said, I'm kind of scatterbrained. But if you have a super strong password and you only allow people from a certain IP address range to get into the WP admin backend area, but you have one user that has a password of ABC123 with admin privileges, then your security is pretty bad. I have offsite backups for ransomware purposes. We'll get into this, but let me go ahead and state it now. What a lot of ransomware people are doing these days is they know most people have 30 days worth of backups. So if they compromise a site, what they'll do is they will actually sit there and they'll wait for 60 days or 6 months and then say, give me 1 Bitcoin or whatever it might be, or we're going to keep your website infected. So the point is, you don't want to just have backups through your hosting provider. You do want to have that daily. You also want backups done on your own, stored on Google Drive using Updraft or something. I don't recall if you had Updraft or not, but it's something I would have. I do it. You could even do it weekly through Updraft, just something. And then every so often, you want to take one of those backups and move them to a thumb drive. So in corporate America, the standard is, let me see if I can remember this, once per day for 30 days, once a month for a year, then once a year for like 10 years. Does it seem kind of stupid to have a backup from 2 years ago? Yes, but what if your website's compromised from a year ago? Does it suck? You'll lose all the changes you've done in the last year? It does, but at least you don't have to recreate everything. So it's not just WordPress. Let me get a sip of water. It's the OS, Apache, database, all that stuff. Now, you may not manage that. That may be done through your hosting provider, so you don't have to worry about it. But if you do, just look at these websites. Go get your website, see if it shows up on any hacked sites, especially on the dark web. I did it for you. Your website looks good. I would subscribe to this free WordPress Security newsletter. All kinds of good information that I get regularly. And you can use WP Scan, which is this is the output here from WP Scan. Now I have the paid version, but you can use the free one, and you get 25 free scans per day. And I'm going to go over the importance of it. So it's a command line tool. Let me just see if I can bring it over here. I'm going to pause it real quick. Okay, so you can see here, it's just a command line tool on, I have multiple, I was a Linux administrator for like 10 years, so I'm a big Linux guy, but you can see it's just WP scan, URL, then this is some other stuff we don't need to get into. But there's all kinds of things you can throw at it to enumerate plugins, enumerate users, etc., etc. So let's kind of get into its findings. So the point I want to show you here is a lot of stuff about your environment can be obtained by doing one of these scans. Now you can get this other ways, right? But this is a common tool that's used. I can see you're using Cloudflare. So if I have a Cloudflare vulnerability, that's good. Now, of course, millions of websites use Cloudflare. I'm not saying that's not a big gotcha moment. It found your robots.txt. So here, so XML RPC is enabled. So there's no reason to use it these days anymore. And REST API has pretty much replaced it as far as I know. And you can see it determined it because this file existed. So these are all little footprints that you're leaving that are helping people understand what your environment is, right? So just by getting rid of that file, this specific script is going to think RPC is, well, this is one check. So if a hacker is using this script, or there's thousands of other scripts, and it's using that to determine if RPC is enabled, it's going to come back as not. So there again, you're not the low-hanging fruit. This is just more stuff. We're not going to go through all this. You can see your WordPress README was found. So if you go here, so this confirms that you're a WordPress installation. And of course, there's many other ways. But you can see, so probably here, let's say this is WordPress 6.3, whatever it is. I don't even know what the most recent version of WordPress is. But this PHP version 7.2.24 or greater, this may be specific to the current version of WordPress. So it's easy to determine what version of WordPress you're using based on reading this by looking at this kind of stuff. Again, this is just one thing. It found a backup directory. We'll get into that in a lot more. Registrations enabled, which it may need to be for your site. So WordPress 6.71 identified. And it found it using this. I see you're using JupyterX. Your version's out of date. Okay, that's not good. We're going to get into that. This is how it found it. Okay, I see you're using a plugin called BPPA Fixes. So that's like a custom plugin I get, right? I get that's your website. That's not something anybody would have an exploit for. So you're using Contact Form 7 and you're using 6.03. So if I had it's the latest version, so I'm just using this as an example, like you're doing the right thing. But this is just going to show you how easy it is to footprint a platform and to kind of see what's going on the platform. So I can see that you're using 6.03. So if I had an exploit for 6.0.3, I could, go run that exploit on your site. I can see you're using Elementor, up to date. And it found it by, Elementor is in the URL. So obviously it's going to give it away. And all kinds of stuff like that. So let me just show you something. Another way. I don't do any proactive stuff anymore. So I'm just getting older and my brain doesn't work as well as it used to. So this is like a search engine for the Internet of Things. So if I search for Apache, so Apache's a web server. These are all, you can see here the IP address. These are all devices connected to the Internet that run Apache. You can see here, it'll display Apache 2.4.10.10. And there's all kinds of information you can get from headers. The point I'm making is if I had a exploit for Apache 2.4.10, I could just search here for Apache 2.4.10 and just go through these one by one by one. So the idea is you want to obfuscate all this stuff as much as possible so you do not become this low-hanging fruit, so you do not show up on these lists. Right? This is a manual search, but there's scripts that are doing this stuff all the time on the internet. And we'll get into how to accomplish that. So you can read through this more if you want. More plugins, shortcodes. Okay. So hosting provider. So use a strong hosting provider password and routinely change it. Common sense. What I do for these things, I set calendar reminders once a month because we'll always forget, saying change my password. Are all FTP accounts valid and created with strong passwords? So there's no way for me to know this, but I went to, let me pause it when I bring up, so I can bring up your information. One moment. Okay, so basically you log into your hosting provider, then go to cPanel here. I don't even know what this drop down is. So yeah, that's webmail. Yeah, cPanel. I think there was like 2. I looked. I think there's like 2. Then just Control F, FTP accounts. So, do you still need these? And if you do they have strong passwords? If you don't need them, delete them, obviously, right? You just want to reduce the attack vectors into your environment. Same thing with SSH. So, I don't think there was any SSH accounts, but something to just be mindful of. Yeah, no SSH accounts, so you're good there. I'll just keep it on there for you. Set up downtime monitoring. So I use Uptime Robot. I actually am in the process of installing Zabbix, which is an open source monitoring solution. Because right now I use commercial services to monitor my client sites. But I'm in the process of installing Zabbix. Anyway, the point of this is, if your website starts going up and down a lot, that's a sign that a lot of times when sites get compromised, they kind of go up and down as things are being tested and services are being probed. So you want to be aware. At a minimum, it's just good to know if your website's going up and down, right? Just from a SEO point of view, just from delivering a good product point of view. But it's a lot of times when your site gets compromised, you'll start to see weird things happening, like your website going up and down. So you can use free services like Uptime Robot. Use two-factor authentication if possible. I do see you have it available. It's something you do definitely want to set up. I think the best thing anybody can do from a security point of view, though, if you could only do one thing, it would be to set up two-factor authentication. That's something I would set up as soon as possible. And then if you're not using Google Search Console, go ahead and do it, and you can read through information here. Okay, so you want to disable directory browsing. You don't want people to see what's in your directories. This is a big problem. So you can see I created a test directory, and I put a file text in it, and I can see it. That doesn't seem bad. However, I did look in the uploads directory, and I have access to all kinds of stuff here. So, I would dig through it and see what's going on. But you want to disable this directory browsing, for sure. Install WP CLI if possible. WP CLI is a command line interface for managing WordPress. Why you want to do this is if your site gets compromised, sometimes often you will get locked out yourself, right? So, you can contact the hosting provider and they can work with you. But it's best to be able to manage your WordPress instance through a command line, right? So you can add and delete users, remove themes, enable, disable plugins, etc., etc. So that's something I would just get installed proactively. Your database prefix has been changed. There's another thing I would do immediately. Restrict access to your, created a video. Let me see if this is a link to my video. Let me do this for you real quick. Norzer. Okay, I made this video a few months back. Forgot to update this link. Okay, so what this means, and you're going to see me mention solid WP Security a lot. I don't work for them. I love their product though. It used to be called iTheme Security Pro. Why I love it is because, 5 years ago, I used to have to download, 5, 6, 7 plugins to accomplish a lot of things that I wanted to do. They have a lot of these things built in to that plugin itself. Now, so if you want me to do this for you, I have an agency license for the product. So, if you pay me to do this for it, you'll have access to that product for free. You're not going to have to pay the annual, I don't know what it costs, $90 a year or something like that. So, that's a perk is, if you pay me to fix all this stuff for you, you would have access to that plugin for free as long as I have access to it. So what this means is if somebody compromises your password, whether it's brute force or a password leak or whatever, and gets into your WordPress backend, there's not much you can do about it. However, if you restrict access to your dashboard based on IP address, you're basically creating a whitelist of IP addresses, and it can be ranges too. Like, so my IP address changes, let's just say it's 100.100.100.3, and sometimes it's 100.100.100.200, whatever, you know what I mean? You can just have you can say anybody that's coming from 100.100.100.0 through 255 can have access to the back end. And you can make the range even broader than that. The point I'm making is it's another level of security. This is something I definitely would enable. So even if somebody gets your password, if they're not coming from that IP address range, they're not going to be able to access the back end, right? Another level of security. Are any of these solutions foolproof 100% on their own? Absolutely not. And that's just not possible. It's just like a house. Like, you could have alarms, you could have dogs, you could have security system, you could have an armed guard. Everything can be circumvented with enough effort and enough will. But you can do what's called, like I said, managing the risk. So that's definitely something. The downside is if you travel a lot, you have to go into a text file on your operating system, on your Linux system, and just add an IP address wherever you're at. Not a big deal, but it just takes, a few minutes of time. Okay, debug is turned off. That's good. Disable login hint. So what this means is when you log into WordPress, you want it to say invalid username and password. You don't want it to say invalid username or explicitly invalid password. You don't want to tell the person that gives the wrong credentials what the wrong part was. So that's something you can do. You can do that and solve the WP security. Right now, I tested it, and when I logged in with an invalid name, it said username does not exist or whatever. You don't want to give that information to anybody. Hide WordPress version numbers. This is where it gets pretty crazy. So this is something I also have an agency license to. So if you go to my company website, Norzer.me. Let me verify. Okay. So this is a WordPress site, but if you go to the source, actually, I hope I still have it enabled right now. Well, let's pull yours up. So if you're familiar with WordPress, you're familiar with these directories, /WP content, WP content, right? So it's a dead giveaway. It's a WordPress environment. I mean, there's other code in here that you can't change. Like, I get that. But a lot of scripts that run explicitly look for WP content directory, themes directory, plugins directory, etc. So what I've done is I've obfuscated it to where instead, I'm not sure this is, so I've created aliases. The directories on the OS still are WP content, WP admin, etc. But I've renamed, I think this is WP content is core, right? Yeah, so anyway, so you're obfuscating that. So the point is, it does it in the back end, so it's really there in the back end, but if a scanner runs and is looking for a server that has the WP content directory, it's not going to show up, and it's not going to show up on the list. So you can imagine that's not only for WordPress detection, that's also going to help when it comes to searching for plugin versions, all kinds of stuff, because all those are assuming the directory of the plugins is WP admin, WP content, etc., etc. So that's something I would do. You can do it for free in the limited fashion using, and I showed you Shodan, WP Hide and Security Enhancer. However, I have an agency license to get WP Ghost. I think the AppSumo deal has expired, which is unfortunate because it's a really great product. Yeah, so that's something that's another critical thing I would do. Cloudflare is being used. This basically means, are you taking advantage of all the Cloudflare security features? This goes back to an earlier point. Delete the readme.html, the WP can sample PHP, install PHP, and these get when WordPress gets updated. A lot of these get, I'm not sure honestly which ones get recreated, but they do get recreated. But the reason I don't know is because I have a cron job a scheduled job that just runs every day and deletes these files, right? So if WordPress update happens, will these files exist on your server for a few hours before being deleted the next day? Yes, but You know, again, we're managing the risk. We don't want to be crazy and be super paranoid and, you know, run it every 5 seconds. It's just, don't want to go totally nuts. And you can do this in solid WP security. Again, have nothing to do with them, but it's a great tool. Another option you can have is move your WordPress files outside of the public HTML directory, out of the core directory, I should say. So it's something, I think it's a little bit more paranoid, but some people do it. And harden PHP if you can. You can look into that. So check site health. So this is just a general tip, and I found some stuff. This is another calendar reminder thing I would do once a month. Tools, where are we at? Tools, where is tools? Wait, blind, let's see. Tools, site health. And this is getting better in time, you know. It used to be just kind of like, okay, this is kind of not interesting stuff, but they're adding a lot, it seems to be they're adding a lot more good stuff. So your site has an insufficient PHP memory limit, so that's something I would address. And you should remove inactive plugins, we'll go over all that. So there's all kinds of stuff here that needs to be addressed. Not all essential security headers are installed. You may not be able to do anything about this depending on how much leeway your hosting provider gives you. Secure with the firewall, fail to ban stuff. Yeah. Also, here is just a good, if you want to get information on your environment, just as an FYI, go here, then go to server. And the thing I noticed that I always check is PHP version 7.4. Latest version is, what is it, 8.3 or 8.4 or something like that. So unless there's a specific reason you're not, and you need to be on the 7x code stream, I would upgrade to 8. Seems to be about 10 to 15% faster, and you know it. Upgrading always has security enhancements as well, so that's something I would do. Never give out your username and password to a contractor. Create a new one. That's exactly what you should be doing, and that's exactly what you do with me. And then what I do, if I work with a contractor on a website, I set I'm the king of calendar reminders. If I set a calendar reminder like 2 weeks in the future, it says delete user from site X, because I've created literally maybe thousands of those over the years, and how many of those, you know, have been forgotten? I mean, who knows, right? Before I started using calendar reminders. Your admin username has changed. That's good. Does every user still need access? So, and there's nothing I can determine for you. It's just something you got, you know your environment, all users, but specifically, do all the admin users still need access? But you can look through these. So you have, oh yeah, you have 2,900. I thought it was 290. Okay, so there's no way you would know that. But what matters the most is, do these admin users still need access? Now, I did install Security Ninja. Let's go over this real quick. Whoops. Let me pause it real quick. Okay, so this is another tool I have an agency license to. We're not gonna, I'm gonna disable it because I don't know how it's gonna conflict with what you currently have. It may or may not. I'd have to do some tests and some research. But I use it to kind of get the results of its little audit thing that it has here. Also, it did pick up 2 vulnerabilities, and yeah, so this is something we'll go over later. So this is something, and this here. So you can see this is interesting. I talked about admin users still needing access, but this vulnerability allows any authenticated attacker, including a subscriber, to gain administrative privileges, right? So now any one of those 3,000 users on your website, if they know what they're doing, if with this version of theme Jupyter you have, can access your websites as admin. So we're going to go over a lot of this stuff. Unnecessary themes. This goes over, got this. We're going to go over this. File permissions, that's true. Yeah, this is all stuff that we're going to go over or have gone over. So let me go ahead and disable this. Let me pause it. Okay, let's see how much more we got to go. We should be getting towards the end. We got a lot of that stuff to cover. Okay, we got quite a bit actually. Hopefully about 10 more minutes. I could go on literally for 5 hours on this stuff. What I want to do is present you with a good overview. If you need any more if you want to do this on your own, that's totally fine. A lot of people do it, and I'm more than happy to answer questions, step you through it. I don't nickel and dime people I work with to death. I'm always happy to help out for sure. Just let me know. Okay, is your admin email correct? Obviously, that's where notifications go. Now you can, it's annoying to get all of them, but we do need to get those. So make sure that's correct. Unique passwords. Nothing that can be controlled, but obviously don't use the same password on multiple websites because password lists are getting leaked all the time to the dark web. Not leaked, well, I guess leaked and dropped, whatever. Disable anyone could register if appropriate. I think you do need that in your case because of your website, but I'm not sure how all that works, honestly. Maybe plugins. A plugin could override that setting, perhaps. But anyway, that's probably not something that's appropriate to you. For strong passwords, you don't want to allow anybody, as you can see, let me step back. You don't want to allow anybody to have a password of password123. Because, like I just showed you that exploit, anybody, even a subscriber, as long as they have an account, now with this exploit, Jupyter, whatever the version is, as long as they have an account and anyone could register, they can now exploit your site and get to administrator, right? So you don't want to have anybody, there's password lists. There's, I don't know how, we talked a little bit, but, people from a manual point of view, from a brute force point of view, you can just throw passwords of millions of passwords at a website and go through it. Now there's timeouts and all that stuff, but eventually you can get through a lot of it. Definitely use two-factor authentication. It's part of Solid WP Security. So these are plugins you can use if you want to do it. I would just use Solid WP Security. Again, that's probably if I could do one thing, it would be that. Change the login page URL. So this is kind of, I don't know why it's controversial, honestly, but it's controversial in some circles. You want your login not to be WP admin or WP login. You want it to be like login page. It's just going to prevent some scripts and some brute forcing. I think the reason some people say it's not that big of a deal is some people pass it off as an all-in-one solution that's going to solve all your problems. It's not going to solve all your problems. But again, all of these steps, that one change might take you out of the script of 10 scripts. Another change we do might remove your website from appearing in 5,000 other scripts. You know what I mean? So all these things add up, and all of them are helpful. Limit login attempts. Again, after somebody tries to log in 3 times, it should lock them out, or whatever that is. You can use Solid WP Security if you want. Add capture to the login page. If you see a lot of spamming and stuff like that, add capture to the login page. Check have I been owned. So basically, just sign up for this. Anytime your email credentials are leaked on the dark web and it sees them, you're going to get a notification about it. So this is the backup plan we went over. Oh my God, so many notifications. Definitely want to have at minimum 2 streams of backups. Because not only from a security point of view, but like I use SiteGround for a lot of my hosting, and I do my own hosting with 20i, etc. It's not uncommon. Well, it's uncommon, but it's not totally nutty that a backup can be corrupt. Why is that popping up? So if you're relying on a backup from your hosting provider and you go to use it and it's corrupt or it didn't finish or something, it would sure be nice to have a second backup. So it's important, not from a security point of view, just from an operational point of view, to have multiple backups. Keep WordPress plugins up to date. So I noticed you don't have auto updates on. There might be a legitimate reason. See here, here, here. And as we went at the very beginning, the most common attack vector is plugins. I would set auto update on. So basically you just do it here. Unless there's a reason you don't want to. Usually corporations and stuff, they want more control. They have much stricter change management protocols, etc. Now you can get a lot more in depth with other tools like that have a lot more options and customizability, and themes as well. So you have a lot of themes. There was something else about the themes. Let me go in and look. I can't quite recall. So that Jupyter X theme details, you can see it's 1.242. The latest version is like 4 point or 6 point or something. So if this is right, that's way, way out of date. Now I notice you have Jupyter X over here too. I'm not quite sure what the difference is for. I think the latest version 6. Anyway, this one's super out of date. And you want to get rid of all these unused themes if you're not using them. Okay, so I only use plugins that are still maintained, and I don't like plugins that haven't been updated in over a year or have under 1,000 installs. So let me show you. Let me see if I can finagle this so we don't have to go back and forth as much. Okay, this might be okay. I'll show you what I mean. So database table overview. You can see here, has not been tested with your current version, updated 3 months ago, and I think it only has 300 installs, right? So I don't know if I would trust that or not. Now, a lot of plugins you have, it looks like you probably used them to do importing and stuff at one time. Go ahead and get rid of them if you don't need them, like that I just showed you. There was a couple others. Anything with import in it. But the bottom line, just are you using all these? Take an account of them and make sure, like the CSV importer, you probably used that at one time. Wouldn't it be super ridiculous if you used this one time to get your site up 3 years ago, haven't used it in 3 years, and you find out your site gets hacked and compromised using an exploit in this plugin that you're not even using? So email log, let's look at email log. Yeah, 12 months ago, has not been tested. Good amount of installs, but it's still old. And I say, do you need, okay, this says basically, do you need these import plugins? JSON API user. It's always fun doing these because I see plugins that I never knew existed. Oh, I don't know what it is. So we go to the plugin site and look, but just looking at Jupyter, went over that. LiveJournal importer. I haven't seen LiveJournal in, what, 20 years? I can't imagine you're still using this. I think this is the one that hasn't been updated in 10 years ago. So this is definitely something I would get rid of. Migrate Guru. Yeah, Migrate Guru, basically, that sounds like you used it at one point to migrate something. So do you seen it? That's what that is. So you get the idea. So that's what all this stuff means. I would go through them one by one. I made a little list for you and see if you need them. We'll see if they meet the threshold I gave you. I mean, there's some plugins that I would, that sometimes it's the only plugin out there and you have to use it. But there's a plugin I like to get notified of logins if somebody logs into my sites, because generally it's just me or one of the few people that work for me. And if I start seeing a lot of weird logins, I know about. That's a good notification that something's going on. So I used to use a plugin called Login Notifier or something like that, and it was getting so old, it hadn't been updated in 4 years, but I was using it because there was another solution. Eventually, I actually created a plugin that all it does is send me an email when somebody logs into my site, and I'm happy to share that with you if you want it. So that, 2 vulnerabilities which went over, JupyterX went over that, delete unused themes went over that, disable pingbacks, I don't think they're being used for anything anymore, disable the REST API. So if you go here, there's all kinds of stuff. Again, this is just this is just more information on your environment. Let me see if anything pops out. Go down, it's usually a little lower. Text status. A lot of time you'll see like plugin names in here. Shipping method ID, that's no big deal. I was hoping to see something that would stick out. But anyway, a lot can be derived. If you really took the time to go through this, a lot can be derived about your environment in this. So you just want to lock this down so that only people with accounts that have admin access can access this information. Again, you're just trying not to be the low-hanging fruit. You can do that in solid WP Security, or there's another plugin called Disable REST API. It uses advanced WordPress login to monitor all changes and get alerts. So this is important because you want to know who's making changes and when they're making them, right? So if somebody updates something in a file, you want to get that log. Solid WP Security, Solid WP now has a pretty decent activity logging tool that comes with it, which is good enough for me. But if you want really advanced stuff, you can get into like WP activity log. But I think it's overkill. I don't think you need all that. It also helps from a troubleshooting point of view. Not even security. It's just, if something breaks, you can go back and look what changed at that time. Yeah, so get notified when somebody logs in or attempts to log in. You can use WP, that's the old one, WP Login Notifier, or I can send you my plugin, super easy to install. Make sure you're using a web application firewall. Like I said, I use solid WP Security. However, you can see I use Security Ninja. There's all kinds of, you have one that's disabled. And there's a couple other plugins related to security you have. So you want to get all that sorted out. You don't want to have overlapping plugins doing similar things. I do have a tutorial video on how to do it here. The video, it's called iTheme Security Pro because that's what it used to be called, but it's 90% the same thing. So if you want to do this on your own, this is a tutorial on how to configure everything. You can totally watch that for free and do it. And there's other ones. File change detection. So you want to know if WP config changes, right? So Solid WP has a file change checker module built into it. Or you can use something called like website file change monitor, and then you get an email. Like you want to make sure you exclude like the caching directory because that's always changing, right? But in the static files, the static directory, at least you want to monitor the core files and make sure nothing crazy is being changed. And RPC, you kind of went over that. And you do have Akismet, but it's disabled for spam. And I think that's it. So you got a lot. You definitely have a lot you can do to improve your security. I would say your security is probably less than average. It's not horrible, but it's just like a lot of thought hadn't been put out to it. That hadn't been like a structured design plan, as far as I can see. And that's not a criticism. That's just the way it is. You're too busy with your job. You shouldn't have to focus on this stuff. You're too busy with your life and your job to worry about all this kind of stuff. But I hope this pointed you in the right direction. Like I said, let me know if you need help with it. Like I can do it as a gig, or if you want to do it on your own and just ask me questions, get my advice, that's totally fine too. I'm not going to charge you for all that stuff. I do not nickel and dime my clients or people that I work with. I kind of take pride in that. I honestly like helping people out and, helping them do this stuff so they can focus on their core business. So let me know what you think. I hope this helped. And, yeah, talk to you soon, hopefully. See ya.